I tried for all of these years to be a kind, loving person, to spread the light, to do all of these cliche, good person, likable things, I had a bout with cancel culture 2.5 years ago. And suddenly, everyone that I had invested so much love into kind of seemed to turn on me. And I said, even after spending all of this, I felt like my character and my like work ethic and who I was as a human didn't matter anymore because of this one choice, and that cancel culture just totally came. And I suddenly was like, well, if this is still going to happen despite all my striving, now I don't need to please anybody. I'm not in a business to please people. I'm in a business to please the Lord and listen to that one voice. And there's actually so much freedom on the other side of feeling like you have everything you do is to please people.
I believe every single person has a ministry. Ministry isn't just for preachers, and it's not just for pastors. It's the way you shine the light that God gave you through His Spirit in all spaces that He's trusted you to walk. That means you on your college campus. That means you at your corporate job. That means you in high school. That means you with your friends at the bar or the restaurant. That means you wherever you are. You have the responsibility to shine God's light in that space, and you get the chance to. Friend, you are beautiful, you are worthy, and you are made to shine. Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Made to Shine show. As you just heard in that introduction, we are in for such a treat today. We have the beautiful, amazing, joyful, just so impressive in so many accounts, but also just such a light of a human being, Laura Osnes with us today. Laura, thank you for being on the show. Welcome.
Hi, Annie. Thank you. I am so delighted and honored to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, I'm so delighted. I know we're talking a little bit before this, and everyone knows, like on this podcast, the mission is to remind every single person you have a ministry. Ministry isn't just for pastors and preachers. It's the way you live your life and shine God's light in all spaces that you hold. And what I've seen from afar with you is songwriting, singing, acting, being on social media, being a wife. Like you do all these different things, but you shine God's light in all that you do, in all the spaces that you hold. And I think what's so cool about that, even just the few comments that we've been able to, our conversation we've had to have before hopping on today, it's really striking. And I think it's so important that the lessons, what you know, the light you shine, like being able to encourage the girls listening in, it's just something that I don't want to take for granted, especially with your time today. So just again, thank you for being on the show. I'm so excited to dive in.
It's very generous of you to say that. And it's a big responsibility that I don't take lightly, that, you know, God trusted me with small responsibility, and I feel like He's given me more in a platform. And
yeah,
I don't want to take that for granted. I don't want to abuse that or not use it, right? We are called to let our light shine bright. And I think I've been through seasons where I've been afraid to do that. I've been through seasons where I've just been coasting through. And then I've been through seasons where I've been really passionate about trying to equip people. And so kudos back to you and what you're doing, and for using your platform to also shine bright.
I know, right? It's also fitting with the Made to Shine show, but it's
Exactly.
so true. Like, it's funny you say just that, because I've been speaking with so many girlfriends recently about like this essence of when you're in a season where God's prompting you to be seen, will you be seen? It's almost like, especially Christians with a platform nowadays, it's like if you don't talk about God, you're embarrassed of Him. But if you talk about Him to too many people, you're egotistical and you're greedy with the platform. And
Right.
so I love speaking with people that are using their platform for good. And I want to get into that because I know you've had a long story that has kind of led you to where you're at today. But before we do, Laura, we have to kick off the show the way we kick off every show, which is, what is your favorite quote and why?
Oh my goodness. Ooh, I wish I could say I had like a life quote that has been like my mantra. I think like my verse is like Proverbs, I think it's Proverbs 3, Wait. Oh no. Now I'm it's the trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, he will direct your path. And like I feel like that has been my mantra. I think it's
Mm.
Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, if I'm
Yep.
if I'm remembering
Yep.
correctly.
Yeah, that's the one on your Instagram bio.
Yes, exactly. And I just like that has been I think the quote that I have tried to make every decision by,
Mm.
every turning point in my life, every morning when I wake up, going like, Lord, I'm inviting you in. I'm acknowledging you. I am bringing you into this conversation, this decision, this audition, this job opportunity, and trusting that he will then direct my path. And so if I had any advice, I guess it would be that.
That's so funny you say that. Literally last week, I did something on my Instagram story about inviting God into everything. Like, I think sometimes we limit God to specific places we associate as godly, like church or even our car playing worship music on Sunday. But it's like, no, he is in everything. Invite him into the meeting, invite him into the closet singing session.
Yeah. I think it's so easy for us all to just be like, oh, God is up in heaven and he wants to do life with us. And it is interesting because you're like, if you talk about it all the time, it's like you want to make God accessible and lovable. And some people are turned off by, too much of that if they don't know him. And so it's like, what is that balance of inviting God in, but then really just discerning and listening to his voice about when you're actively supposed to talk about it and bring it up, or just you're aware. And I think as a result of my awareness, whoever I'm with is also becomes aware in the Holy Spirit way. It allows the Holy Spirit to do the work without me feeling like I have to.
It does, and that requires intimacy. Someone once told me, it's like, I could be in a crowd with thousands of people, and if my daughter spoke, I would hear my daughter because I've spent time with my daughter. It's the same thing with God's promptings. And I know, like right before we hopped on here, you were talking through how there's been such a journey in your life to get to where you are, and so many open doors, so many closed doors. And I'm sure there were times you were like, God, did I hear you wrong? Did I hear you right? I don't want to hear you in this way that you're saying because it hurts, or this is what I wanted. So kind of take us back to, I mean, you're doing so much. You're acting, you're singing, you're writing, like you do so much. I'm curious kind of like, what are the biggest parts of context of your journey that led to this Laura that I'm speaking to today, that's able to kind of have that intimate relationship with God, confident in using her platform today to speak about Jesus and God's love?
Cool. I'm like, how much time do we have? You want like the
all the time.
I will say, let's see, if I get off track, like bring me back
You
to
can't
like
be off track. This is for you. Our listeners want to hear from you, not me.
I love it. So I grew up in a Christian home. So I remember asking the Lord into my heart when I was like 4 years old. So my grandpa was a Lutheran pastor. My parents got divorced when I was 2, but they lived close and both were still a big part of my life. And I felt very loved by them. And both of them knew Jesus, but I would say my dad was more the spiritual leader growing up. And then my mom really, her faith moved to like the front burner of her life when I was more like in high school. So I had that and kind of a base knowledge. And to be honest, I never really went through a season where I doubted God. I never had like a rebellious phase where I felt like I needed to like explore other religions. I think I always felt, and I knew in my heart, I'm very much I experience God as a Christian more than like intellectually know about him. I think God is supposed to be experienced, and I've always just known him to be true because I have felt him to be true from a very young age. And he has worked, oh my goodness. And like, how many testimonies can I share? Countless times in my life, going back to that verse of directing my path. I think one of the big ones, a few big ones, and I did theater for years, right? I got to work on Broadway. So career-wise, there were a few doors that like I didn't get Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz at community theater, and I was in final callbacks. But then like 3 years later, I got to play the role of Dorothy at a professional theater in Minneapolis and like won an award in the newspaper. I didn't get Sandy in Greece at community theater, when I was in high school, but then 3 years later won a national competition televised to play Sandy and Grease on Broadway. I didn't get accepted into my first choice college, which was Cincinnati Conservatory. Didn't get in. And so I went to a state school. But like all of those doors closed, like now I'm able to look back and go like, that was all part of God's plan. Like what felt like a devastating closed door in the moment was just not God's timing. And just to be able to have countless testimonies like that, like I just go, why would I ever doubt God? Like he has me and his plan is highest and best for my life. So even what I think is the best thing, like every closed door taught me a lesson. Every no became a knowing about or challenged me to want to get better or grow or veered my path to another direction. And then there have been times too where I've had two things to choose from, which is what a blessing. And learning to discern and go like, okay, two open doors. Which one am I supposed to walk through, God? And what my agent was saying or what the world would have said would have been, you know, the most advantageous for me or for my career a couple times was not the one I was feeling God was pushing me towards or the thing I was getting excited about. So I think in my experience, learning to discern like where I feel the peace and where I feel the excitement and joy, and following that instead of what the world may say or the industry may say. There's been roles I've gotten that I knew I wouldn't want to do. And my agents were like, just audition, see what happens, that I ended up getting. And then I had to still follow through on my conviction and go, I'm still going to turn this down. It's a role I don't feel comfortable doing, or I don't want to do. The industry can be really dark sometimes, and knowing where your boundary is, where your line is, and not feeling like you have to compromise who you are or your values, and being able to stand up in a loving way and just have a backbone has been something I have had to learn time and time again in this industry. And I think is so important for young girls who, whether they're going into theater or not, I think the world in general, it's a very important skill to be able to learn.
That's beautiful. And what I love about that, I once heard it put, it's like strong heart, or no, soft heart, strong backbone. Like that, you know, like we keep your heart soft because you don't want to have I think a lot of people take that like strong backbone, like it means you've got to be cold, like you've got to be like the world. But no, it's like soft heart, be loving, but strong backbone, like stick up for what you want. Yeah.
I was going to say, I actually wrote a song a couple years ago called Thick Skin, Soft Heart. And it's the same thing where it's like, I get asked all the time, like, how do you not let the, rejection get to you in the industry? And how do you keep going? And how do you continue to be a light in a dark place? And I'm like, you do have to develop a little bit of a thick skin. Mm-hmm. You do. You can't take everything so personally. Mm-hmm. You have to keep showing up and have the courage to be able to do that. But still, I don't want to ever be jaded, right? I don't want to become that bitter, jaded actress
it's true. Yeah. And I think going back to that, like so much of what you do too, it is in the public eye, and it is up for it's up for evaluation. It's up for, there's like metrics on like how this was responded by an audience, whatever have you. And going back to your songwriting, you wrote a song called Good Enough, I believe was the title.
Enough. Yeah, it's called Enough.
Enough. Yes, because I remember, so I was looking at some of the lyrics of that song, Enough, and it made me think about this idea of being good enough. Like, am I good enough? And that's something that I think, regardless of what you do, whether you're a lawyer, a teacher, a sales executive, a mom, a daughter, a friend, a podcast host, an actress, a singer, there's always in the back of the mind, like, am I going to be good enough yet? Like, am I good enough yet? And I'm curious for you, like, how do you, as a daughter in Christ, knowing Christ is the one who already calls you good enough, how do you have the motivation to continue to want to succeed, but not let it overtake you to the point where you're relying on that to feel good enough? Like, where do you get your metrics for feeling enough?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Again, something I've really had to learn. And my answer to that question has shifted over the years, because I think in this age of social media, we are fueled by the likes, right? Yeah. And that gives us worth, and that gives us the endorphins of value, when really it's all a facade and it's fake. And if we base our value off of what other people are saying, we're only setting ourselves up for disappointment. And we're not, I don't think, living authentically. And so we're called to be in the world, but not of the world. And I think I was always pretty well liked, thankfully, thank the Lord. And I think I was a people pleaser, and we all enjoy being like, we enjoy the applause. We enjoy being complimented and feeling validated in that way. And even though I tried for all of these years to be a kind, loving person, to spread the light, to do all of these cliche, good person, likable things, I had a bout with cancel culture 2.5 years ago. And suddenly everyone that I had invested so much love into kind of seemed to turn on me. And I said, even after spending all of this, I felt like my character and my like work ethic and who I was as a human didn't matter anymore because of this one choice. And that cancel culture just totally came. And I suddenly was like, well, if this is still going to happen despite all my striving, now I don't need to please anybody. I'm not in a business to please people. I'm in a business to please the Lord and listen to that one voice. And there's actually so much freedom on the other side of feeling like you have everything you do is to please people. Now I feel like more authentic than ever. And I'm going, if you don't like it, cool. I don't want to be your friend anyway. And if you do, I'm speaking to you. I want to find you. If it's like everybody has a unique thing to offer. And so trying to be someone else, trying to manipulate your values or who you are to try to fit in. We're not called to fit in. We're not supposed to fit in. It's like, be your authentic self and let your people find you for being who you are.
Yeah, that is, I think what's so powerful about that too, I once heard it put, everybody comes into this world as an original, but most die a copy. And it's because we are trying to copy ourselves to what we think other people are going to approve of, or going to clap for, or going to praise, or going to celebrate. And I think about, like, I'm obsessed with the life of David right now. And I thought, like, going between the contrast of like Saul and David, Saul made so many decisions based off of what he thought would kind of keep the love of the people for him as king, versus asking God, what do you want me to do here? How do you want me to be here? And I'm curious for you, like, you are in a position where, one, you are seen by a lot of people, but two, you're also, I feel like in your industry, it's so easy to compare yourself to other people and compare where your career is or what you're working on versus what other people are working on. Maybe even, I don't know if you do this. I think regardless, comparison is something that plagues us all. And it's so easy to compare yourself to people that aren't even in your lane. It's like, man, I'm a podcast host, but I'm like, that person's doing that over there. That's so cool. I'm not doing that, but I'm not called to do that. So talk to me about the power of, like, one, I think you have to get to the point where you're no longer looking. I think we just like to search for the applause. What are people clapping for? Why am I not doing that? Versus asking yourself, is God actually calling us to do that? So talk to me about the importance of rooting your direction in life and what God is calling you to do, and how you even know kind of like what God is calling you to do.
Oh my gosh. I wrote a song about that too. It's called On the Other Side. And it's all about, like, scrolling through your phone and being like, she's this, like, always finding, like, the things that are better, but really how you never know what's going on in someone's head. You know what I mean? We see all the good parts usually on social media, and you go, like, she's probably just as insecure as I am. Or what if she's looking at my thing going like, oh, I wish I could sing, even though I'm like, oh, I wish I was that beautiful, or, oh, I wish I was, it's like the song is essentially like, the grass ain't always greener on the other side. Like, you may see something you think you want, but, like, you have no idea that person's probably just as insecure as you. And so, trusting that. And then as far as, how do you know where God's pushing you? I think I've been in a season of feeling like I'm putting every iron in the fire and then waiting to see what God breathes on and where his momentum is. And as a result, it's been kind of vulnerable. You know what I mean? Songwriting, I'm like, I've never done this before. I feel like an old dog learning a new trick. But Lord, I think you're giving me something to say. And so I want to use that platform. it feels like 3 people are listening to the songs. And I'm like, Lord, it's okay. It's not for them. It's for you. And it's because you told me to do it. And it's for me. It's been semi-healing for me, also challenging for me, if I'm going to be honest. And I'm starting to go, okay, I've done this for 2.5 years and it's still kind of challenging. It's not a joy for me. I'm being so honest with you here and going, okay, what am I learning from that? Lord, are you calling me to kind of put some eggs in another basket and knowing like, okay, I'll always have that, but I don't need to be cool. That doesn't need to be quite so front burner as it has been the last couple of years. I just wrote a rom-com movie script and I'm like, cool, I've never done that before. And I think as creatives, like God is the ultimate creator and we get to be his vessels for creativity here. And it's like, I've just felt called to new forms of creativity and I'm kind of trying my hand. I'm in a season of trying my hand on a lot of things and waiting to see what he breathes on and where his momentum is. So it's interesting doing some TV film stuff. I teach and I coach on occasion, building a concert series potentially here in Franklin. It's good and it's exciting. And I feel like these are all like downloads from God. But I'm like, if I try to do them all at once, I'm going to be spread too thin and none of them are going to have my full attention and excellence. So I have felt a little overwhelmed as a result the last few months, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
And so I'm in a season of needing to pray and discern and go like, Lord, what can I focus? What do you need me to focus my attention on to push something through to the finish line? Because I have all these like half opened and half committed and like halfway down the line ideas and projects. But I think it's learned like, where's the joy? Where do you feel peace? What do you get excited about? And if you feel a halt or if you feel worry or fear or anxiety or overwhelmed, it's like, okay, Lord, what does that mean? Am I supposed to maybe put that aside for a little bit? And the balance of the hustle and also resting and trusting that God's timing is perfect.
It's so true. It made me think about like when I was, my family, I come a massive sports family. I'm one of four kids and my mom had 4 kids under 4. So we were all like growing up in a household, things were crazy. And my parents are super into sports. So it wasn't, are you playing sports? It's what sport are you playing? Okay. And we basically like until 6th grade, you signed up for everything. So I was in softball, I was in tennis, I was in like just soccer, like basketball, absolutely everything. And I remember in 6th grade, it got to the point where you were doing so much, you couldn't really specialize in one. So my parents were like, okay, which is the one that you get the most excited to go to practice for? And I was like, oh, that's easy. Soccer and tennis. I love tennis because my coach would always give me bubble gum when I got it in the court. And soccer, I just love my teammates in soccer. So I was like, that's easy. I love soccer and tennis. But I loved your litmus test of like, what's the things that's exciting and bring you joy? And not necessarily the things that aren't hard. I mean, I always equate it to like, whatever God calls you to do, it's like running with the wind. It's still a run. It's going to be hard, but it's a difference between running with the wind versus running against it. You know, like what's the thing that makes you feel powerful and excited, but to give like something you're doing such credit that I don't think enough people do, you're trying. You are trying so much. I think so many people get paralyzed at the point where God gives them an idea and they never try it. They get stuck in that, I'm going to prepare to prepare. I'm going to study to study. But it's like, you got to take the test at some point. You got to do something. Even if it's the wrong thing, at least by doing the wrong thing, you know it was the wrong thing and you can go do the right thing. But you never know if you don't move. And so I think that's what's so great about that. And I'm curious for you, like, what do you think is different about you and what you've done and how like faith looks like for you in regards to like taking that step, making that move? Because I think we do live in a world where we compare ourselves to people, but God has given us ideas in our own heart and mind that live there forever because we don't move with our feet and do with our hands to make the first step towards that happening.
Yes, so good. I love everything you said. This is great. I think having the boldness to act in obedience is half the battle. And it becomes, I think, easier as you get older and you have more experiences of God's faithfulness in your bold obedience. I remember I auditioned for like a TV reality show way back when that cast me as Sandy in Grease on Broadway. And I heard about it in the newspaper, and I was currently playing Sandy at a theater in Minneapolis. And it was a national televised competition like American Idol to find Sandy and Danny in Grease on Broadway. This was in 2007 on NBC. And I felt I was like 19 at the time. And I felt a clear, like, go from God, like Geo, go. And I was like Moses, like doubting, going like, but what will I say? What will I do? How will I do this? How will I do that? And God was just like, I will give you the words to say. I will open the door. I will do all of this for you. Yeah. Just obey. Yeah. And I had like so many things had to go right for me to be able to go. I was in a show at the time. So I remember writing a letter to my director and going, I feel like I'm supposed to do this, but obviously I'm committed to your show. And that is my first priority. Like, is there a world where I could ever call out for a weekend and my understudy could go on and I could fly to LA for this audition? And then luckily my boyfriend at the time, who became my husband, I was dating, Nate and I were dating, his sister lived in Pasadena. So and the thing is, the director like gave me the green light. It was like, yes, you should go. We'll cover you for the weekend, which is like unheard of. Like it doesn't happen. But if God wants it to happen, he's going to make it happen. But it took me asking and being bold and feeling that go so strongly, but you have to be bold enough to try to act in obedience. Yeah. And so we ended up staying in Pasadena. I auditioned. I made it to the next level, and I had to call and be like, I have to stay 2 more days. And they were like, okay. And I'm worried that I'm like going to ruin my reputation at the theater. They're never going to hire me again. And then I ended up coming back and then having to leave the show early to basically move to LA to compete live on TV every week. Wow. And that whole time I had this peace. Even though I was like, I'm probably ruining my relationship with the theater, it turned out I win the show. And not to say that everybody's story is going to be like that, you know? I have a very, very unique story. But that was like, what if I had let fear and anxiety or feeling like, oh God, that can't be you, that go can't be you. Yeah. Let that inhibit me trying to just going for it. And that was a big move. I was so young at the time and I had no idea. But luckily I had support. I had people that were like, yes, how can we help this happen? And my director said go. And it was just like green light, green light, green light, green light. And then I won. And I was like, I often think back and going like, what if I had been too afraid to even take the first leap of faith and step off the ledge? And God wanted me to fly, but I had to meet him halfway, you know? Did we freeze?
Yeah, just a little bit. We're good. We can edit that out. No, but what I was going to add is I think what's so powerful about what you just said is it's obedience to acting, like taking the step and going. Sometimes obedience looks like sitting and not moving and trusting God to move. And I say that because like 2 things came to mind when you said that. I am such a doer. I'm like a go girl. When someone says go, I'm like, let's go. So I think it's so powerful is I know there's 2 types of audience members listening, and there's the people that are like me and sounds like could also probably be like you, like we're goers, we're go, go, go. Like for me, I think like every single podcast guest I've had on, like you included, I've reached out, I plant that seed. I have no idea if God's going to water that seed, but I've done it. I've done my part. I've executed it. Like he put me on this heart to invite this person. I invited, we'll see what happens. There's also been moments in my life where I have put out all these seeds. I feel like I've done everything I can do. And you said that like that waiting, there's a waiting season component. You have to wait to see where God discerns your path moving forward. Like, is it this thing? Is it not? Maybe it's a waiting period. Like, God, I have no other moves to make. I need you to do something because I don't feel you telling me to do anything. I feel you telling me to sit back and see what happens. And I'm curious, regardless of what season you're in, like I'm sure you've been in both in your life. Yeah. How do you practically hold on to God in seasons of waiting where his voice doesn't feel clear, where it feels muffled, where you're like, I can't confidently say I heard from God to go, or heard from God to stay, or maybe I did hear from him to go and I went, and now I'm like, where you at, God? I went. Like, how did you hold on to God in those moments of your life and now walking through moments of your life?
It's such a good question that I feel I'm daily refining that answer. I feel like I had a friend that gave me a word for this year that, like, God is telling me he wants you to rest. And I was like, okay, great. However, we've recently had a financial thing where resting like isn't an option. And so I'm like, okay, God, like we got to push something to the front burner. That's why I'm saying, like, I feel like we got to get something across the finish line.
Mm-hmm.
But his timing is great. But what's that balance? So I am like, God, I trust you. Here's the thing is, how do you hold on to God was your question, is that I have peace. I have peace. I feel like 5 years ago, I would have been super anxious about this season of like, oh no, how are we going to this? And this opportunity fell through and that door closed and this person, we lost this and whatever. And now I'm like, oh, I know God has this because I have felt dropped before. I have, I've been in this place already. Now that my world's been rocked and we've survived through it, I'm like, oh, I can survive it. We can survive anything. And if we have to, whatever, like I trust in God's faithfulness now because he has shown himself faithful time and time and time and time and time again in my life. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, God, you're not going to take us this far and abandon us. Mm-hmm. But I think I love that you said that about the different seasons of rest and waiting. And I feel like there are times to plant seeds, mm-hmm. and then you have to wait. You have to wait for them to be watered and for things to begin to sprout. And like Rome wasn't built in a day. These things don't happen overnight. And in those seasons of waiting, I feel like God refines us. Mm-hmm. He builds our character. He draws near. And we're forced to have to trust and rely on him mm-hmm. and his goodness and his faithfulness instead of thinking that we did it all out of our own.
Mm-hmm. Like, I love that. That's so good. And when you're saying that, I was even thinking too, like, planting seeds take time. That could be with a business, with a job, with something you're writing. It also could be with characteristics. It could be with confidence. It could be with like a posture of gratitude, a consistent practice of prayer. You know what I mean? It's like, it's those internal seeds too, with the internal fruit that typically the fruits of the spirit, that's way more important than anything outside of us, but it takes time for that to grow. And when I was like prepping for this podcast and looking through a lot of the songs, like we mentioned it before, but your song Enough really struck me. And the lyrics specifically, like, darling, I got you, you're more than enough. You've got nothing to prove. You don't have to be so tough. These there are shades of your beauty that shine in the mess. I still want every piece of your brokenness. And even like that line, shades of your beauty that shine in the mess, made to shine. Like, I was just so drawn. I was so drawn to that. And even reading that now, it's so funny. I'm right now filming like part of my last devotional. And the day I filmed right before I hopped on with you was to the girl who thinks she's too broken for love. And the whole message is like, your brokenness is not a deviance from love. It's a vessel for it to be poured into and carried into. And I'm curious, I know you wrote that song for your husband initially. How is that song like also could be portrayed to your relationship with God, and how like God has poured into parts of you would deem as broken, and they've served as the very seeds, going back to what you were just talking about, that have blossomed into this fruit of feeling enough.
Yeah. I wrote this song, yes, thinking about Nate, but definitely also thinking about God, I wrote it when I was about a moment where I was on the floor, like just felt like I had lost everything I had ever known. And God met me in that place. He showed up, and I took so much care in the production of the song. Like, it was so interesting, the journey of it, because the production started as like kind of a like lilty, like kind of not positive, but like hopeful kind of love song, I guess, or song in a way, encouraging, hopeful song. And I said, no, you don't understand. Like, this needs to sound like her world caved in and she is in the deepest, darkest place. And like production wise, you hear that now. It starts with this like thunder, boom, 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 boom. And it's like, that's what it has to feel like, that she's on the ground. And the chorus is like God or Nate or whoever that person in your life is that just takes your face in their hands and goes like, darling, I've got you. You're okay. You are enough. I love you. You're going to get through this. And I just thank you for realizing that. I feel like the growth that we go through as human beings happens in the hard times. That my husband has been like, I know you feel so broken right now and you feel like you can't shine, but like you're being refined. And you sometimes have to be refined in a fire. It's not easy. If life was like easy, like that's actually makes us soft. It makes us really soft human beings. And I have found that I've grown so much from having to walk through a fire or walk through any fire in life. Now, everybody's been through their own fire. All of you listening are maybe in a fire right now or have been in a season of fire. And it's not about whose fire is the biggest or worst or hardest. It's going, what have you learned? What is your attitude in the midst of the fire? And I had to go through all of the like denial, bitterness. I also wrote a song called Bitter. And I was like, this is where I am today. Like, and that's okay. That was my truth in that moment. I felt like I need to write a song about it because if I'm feeling this way, I bet someone else has felt this way. And then I write the song Enough. That's just like for the person that just feels so broken and lost, like know that there's light at the other end of the tunnel and you are still worthy. You are still beautiful. You still have a purpose, even though you feel broken. You will get through to the other side and see why all of that had to happen.
That like brings chills. Two things. One, I was on a podcast the other day with somebody and they were talking about how like, if you look at landscapes, like mountain landscapes, all the vegetation is in the valley. Like when you get to the mountain, it's called the bald for a reason. Like there's no growth, there's no life there. Like you get all the life really in the valley because that's where the nutrients are. That's where the soil grows deep. And I'm just like, that's so true. Like in my valleys of life, that's where I feel like the soils of my heart are really open to the nutrients God's bringing in. That's where the life shines forth. And even the Psalms talk about like God draws near to the brokenhearted. Like David is so honest with God about what he's feeling time and time again. And then the second side of that is you kept using this illustration of fire. And I really hope I don't botch this, but there was this Instagram reel I was watching of someone explaining the process that a silversmith goes through to refine silver. And basically, he sits there for hours in front of the fire with all of his equipment on, holding that piece of silver at the very middle of the bar of silver in the fire. And he has to sit there the entire time because just a second too long or a second too soon, it's ruined. But he pulls it out just the right time to where it's something even more beautiful than it was before he put in, but he holds it at the middle. And it just made me think like God sits with us while we're in the fire to make us better than something we were before. And he holds us at our core. He's never let go of us. He doesn't just drop us in there, say, I'll be back in 2 hours. No, he sits with us the entire time. And it's just, he's just such a good God and such a faithful God, even in the moments like we don't feel good enough. And I'm curious for you, like, this is something that I know I struggle with is when you hear someone, especially like for you, your husband, I feel like there's a lot of girls listening in, they're younger, they're not married yet, or they're engaged, whatever have you. It's like, there's the part of your heart that just genuinely believes you're not good enough. You have someone telling you that you are. And it's like this absorption problem. You don't know how to actually absorb it. I'm curious if that was ever like people I think that struggle with that lie, like you're not good enough, you don't amount. Even if you have people telling you, no, you are so beautiful. Like, even if it's God, like just how do you accept that? What do you think the barriers are to that?
I think at the end of the day, it has to come down to a knowing. I'm like, read Ephesians and read all of the things you are. You are chosen. You are set apart. We are adopted. You are loved. You are children. You are royalty. Like, and really, imprinting those things on your heart. Because first and foremost, you have to love yourself before you can love someone else and even allow someone to love you. And I think, there's certain guys out there that want a project and, want to fix the little broken bird. I get it. But a healthy relationship, I think, is one who, yes, you have to be there for each other in seasons. My husband, man, picked me off the ground so many times, but I've also been there for him in other seasons where he has needed a cheerleader. So we balance each other in really beautiful ways. But it's trusting who you are in God and not comparing that you were made unique and special. You have a unique set of gifts and characteristics and talents and depth of everything, skills, to all of that stuff to bring to a relationship, to a career, to the world, to your community. And just being solid in that. I think a humble confidence. It's not a haughtiness. It's not a cockiness, but it's humbly knowing you have nothing to prove because you're already royalty before you even walk in the room, before you even meet your future husband, of being so certain that you're like, I know God loves me and he created me. And so if I don't love who he created, yes, we all have room to grow. You know what I mean? And none of us are perfect. Like we're not enough. That's why we need him. But reminding ourselves that daily. And I'm like, my whole feed changed after I went through the cancel thing. I was like, I need to be feeding myself other things. I started following all of these like Christian and podcasters and self-help things and inspiring, empowerment quotes and all this stuff. Cause I was like, I can't be feeding myself with all that stuff that's going to make me compare, that's going to make me spiral, that's going to make me. So there are lifestyle things and find your people, man. Find a community of people that's going to lift you up and surround you and cushion you, and not judge you, not laugh at you, not abandon you. So I think that, all of those things.
It's so true. I love what you said about reorienting, especially your inputs, right? And I'm so into I love self-development books, and also I love when self-development books written by secular writers align with the Bible. I'm like, yes, you got your content from the Bible. But all that to say, it talks about inputs, and even God talks about that, meditate on what is good and pure and lovely, and what are you meditating on? And that goes from what you're consuming with your social media feed to the podcast to the music. Music is, I think, the number one molder of the brain and the spirit, because whether you realize it or not, the rap music you're listening to, the music that's I don't know, degrading yourself or your body or a woman's body, or it impacts how you look at yourself. And I think one of the biggest things I did, so I went through a similar phase where I was like, okay, social media audit, who are we following? Who do we need to unfollow? And some people were great, Jesus loving girls that there was nothing wrong with them. I just compared myself to them and I needed to unfollow them to protect myself, which that's okay, people. You can do that.
Exactly. That's
you can do that. But it's having high standards for your inputs. And I think what it does is it helps you identify God's voice in your mind and in your light and in your heart, identify the people's voice that you need to gravitate to, and also your own voice and the things in your life that express your voice. For me, this podcast is an expression of voice. It's where I feel like I hear God's voice through my guests and God's voice through my spirit when I do them on my own. For you, I know you once said music helped you find your voice. And I think what's powerful about your journey, and I know you mentioned your songwriting, it's something you're exploring and continuing to explore. For you, it's one thing, I think, to trust God to use your voice for yourself, for your loved ones, for God, to praise God, to talk to God. It's another to publicly put your voice out there. And earlier in this podcast, we talked about the courage to be seen and the courage to have a platform to speak out, especially with your experience of cancel culture and saying something and not being appreciated for it. Talk to me about the progression and the revelations you had in taking what was initially a private voice between maybe you and God, like beginning to share music and just like, God, I think I want to do this thing, to moving that towards something other people can see, something they see your vulnerability. You mentioned vulnerability is hard. You said that in an interview once. Like, talk to me about the power though, in being willing to do that.
So good. I had a couple people surrounding me. One was like a music manager friend of mine that had been literally planting the seed like 6 months before COVID. And I was like, no, 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 like before 2020. And I was like, no, 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 that's not what I do. I bring out someone else's work to life. And then when this all happened to me, like a year and a half later in the middle of 2021, like he just was kind of like, I feel like this could be an outlet, just wanting to continue. Just so God like kind of planted the seed a year and a half and was just kind of knocking on my heart this whole time. And then finally the situation warranted me going like, I actually do have something to say. And I don't know how to go about doing this, and he helped surround me with people that were experienced, that could hold my hand and teach me how to do it and help me co-write songs, which was so cool. Like if you're willing to, again, have the boldness to try something new. And then my husband as well, I feel like was such just a support system in that way. And feeling like, again, when you're called to do something, like God's going to put the people in your path so you can run with the wind, like you were saying. And it still sometimes feels like an uphill battle, but I'm like, try, go and do it. Was that the question? What was the question? I feel like
that was exactly the question. That was just, I think what's so, because so many people tuning in, I feel like are at this cross. Oh, did you have another thing to say?
Well, I was going to say it was like, how do you choose to use your voice? Yeah. I feel like when put in a situation where you can act in courage or sink back into the crowd, who are you going to be? And I literally felt God going, be strong and courageous. The Bible says, be strong and courageous. And so that's where I felt like that's what he was calling us to do, was to act in courage. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Instead, pray. And like, we're like, we cannot allow ourselves to operate out of fear right now. And so it was Nate too. Nate was huge. My husband was huge in that. And it felt like even though we were maybe going to lose a lot of friends, our families fortunately were very supportive and very much in our corner. And so I was like, well, if we lose all that, at least we have this. And God was just calling us to be courageous. I have my necklace here. It says courage on it. Like, again, I'm like, what are you feeding yourselves? What are the words? What are the things that you're going to continue to choose? And think about who are you and who are you called to be when put in a situation where you either have a choice, either act in courage or blend in. What are you going to do? And maybe there's a time for everything. Maybe you sense the courage, but you're not ready yet. But tomorrow, maybe you are. And what are you doing in the meantime to equip yourself to be able to act in courage when you are called to?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Amen. Let's go to church. That was so true. But like even that word courage, it means like with heart. And there was a woman who spoke, like she introduced me to Jesus. She just was such a pivotal person in my life. And she would sign every letter to us, me and my sisters and my brother, all my love, Gwen. We actually, my sisters and I, we have matching tattoos in her handwriting of all my love, because
I love that.
But all that to say, the reason she would say that is because she's like, Annie, anything you do in your life, do it with all your love and all your heart. And she would remind us, if you do, it's gonna be different than anything this world has ever seen, because God put a heart in you that is unlike any other heart out there. So by nature, by doing that thing he's called you to do, no one's going to have ever seen it before. So it's probably going to get judged because they don't have context for it. They don't have a category for it. The world loves categories. Our music is in categories. Like Beyonce comes out with a country song and people are like, I don't have a category for this. They freak. Post Malone is now in country music and you're like, what is this? But I think that's why Taylor Swift, that's why she's so successful, is because she wasn't confining herself to country Taylor Swift, pop Taylor Swift, folk Taylor Swift. She was all of it. And I think this isn't a Taylor Swift podcast, but I think going back to like God put before I knew you, I formed you. Before the world knew you, I set you apart. Like Jeremiah 1:5. I think I botched that, but Jeremiah 1:5. It's along those lines. Before the world knew who you were or could put a category on you, God knew you. And he knew what he put in your heart. So anything you feel called to do, whether that's music or writing or acting or podcasting or corporate world, if you're really listening to God in that, you're going to do it in a way that this world has never seen before. And so it's like, will you be obedient to that? And I'm curious for you, as someone who's coming out on the other side of that obedience, what have you learned about God that you didn't know before? Being obedient to creating in the way he designed you to, how has that taught you more about our ultimate creator?
Oh, I love it. I feel like I am in a season where God is calling me to create with him, not for him. And my whole life, I've performed for the glory of God, right? And I feel like I really have attributed, I did try to do that. I'm like, God, this is all for you. And God has me in a season which is so much more personal of creating with him. So I'm like, oh, I know God better now. I'm not an expert. I still don't know what he's saying all the time. And I'm constantly trying to discern and constantly trying to act in obedience. And I don't know. I have no idea what I'm doing. But I'm saying yes. And I'm going, okay, Lord, like there's no better place to be than in the center of his plan, doing what he's calling you to do instead of what I feel I should be doing. So it's fun. It's fun and it's rewarding to create with him. And I feel like if I'm doing that, then I have to trust that one of these things is going to come to fruition. Talk about waiting for seeds to plant. I'm like, okay, I wrote a script. Cool. God, I tried to act in obedience. And now I'm like, am I ever going to is someone going to buy this movie? Is someone going to are we ever going to do this? I'm active. I actually sent an email this morning. So we will be praying for favor about that.
Yes, we will. Community.
That's it. And it's the doing a little bit, but it's also trusting his timing, going, this has been in the works since last summer. It's been almost a year since I started writing that thing and going it's put in the work, trust that God's going to show up, creating with him, learn. And the more you learn to discern his voice, it does become a little easier, but it's quiet sometimes. And sometimes it is a season of wait and just let me take one tiptoe at a time and be like, is this the right direction, God? But there's no better place to be.
Oh, that's so. Have you ever read the book With by, oh, I'm sending it to you. It's so funny. Seriously, this book changed it was funny. I read it this past December and the Made to Shine fam is going to laugh because I think every podcast I was like, have you read With? Have you read With? I'm sending you With. And so it's been a little hiatus since they've heard about With, but we're bringing it back, folks. With is this amazing book. I'm blanking on the author, but he's fantastic. He talks about how a lot of people work for God, but we're called to walk with God. And the difference is, imagine a river. There's people who don't even get in the river, like the current of the spirit, because they're afraid to. There's people who try to speedboat, they try to go way faster than the spirit's calling them. And we're called to be kind of on an inner tube.
Love that.
You know what I mean? It's just let your current flow, and that's going with God. And so we will absolutely be praying for that. And I just think it's so amazing that, with that posture and that humility to do that, it comes from all of your experiences up until this point. And, Laura, you're doing so many fantastic things. You have so many things in the works coming out. And I want to round out last question of the podcast, which is, so many people ask the question, what advice would you give to your younger self? But I think what's so cool is Jesus puts so much emphasis on having childlike faith, right? And so I'm curious for you, what would child Laura give current day Laura? What advice would she give her?
Wow. Just the few things that are coming to my mind, the instincts, I don't even know how to put words to it. But first and foremost, putting my identity in what matters. I feel like I put a lot of my identity in those talents, those skills, and what I did. And when that was taken away, I didn't know who I was. And God has been showing me the last couple years that I'm enough without that. If I never sing another note again, if I never make another movie or write another play or movie or whatever, that it's, you know who your identity is in Christ. And I also, the word playful came to my mind. Of when I think of a child, I think of being able to play. And honestly, as a creative, that's what we do. It's art. It should be fun. It should be a play. Getting on stage and acting out lines and telling a story and becoming someone else is playful. I can do the same thing through a song. I can do the same thing through a script. And allowing God to use us as instruments to play for his glory with him. And that's the creative in me speaking. I don't know if, as some people might be in business or have other strengths and talents, but keep playing, keep dreaming.
Ooh. I thought about the Israelites when you said that, like when God parted the Red Sea and they walked through it and they realized like that the Red Sea had swallowed up their enemy and God had done it. Like the first thing they did was bring out their tambourines. They had a legit dance party. Like that's the first thing that they did. And I think God delights in that. Like there's a reason music, someone was telling me like music is the closest thing to magic that we have in this world because it transforms. And like, you know, that is just our heart. Even it's a rhythm. It beats to its music. Like our heartbeat is music. And so I love that you use the word playful. I think that's so specific and so beautiful. And Laura, you are such a light. Thank you so much for being on the show today, shining your light here with these girls of this community. Where can people find you? Where can they support you? Where can they find what you're up to?
Thank you. I am on social media. Instagram is probably my main platform at my name, Laura Osnes, LauraOsnes. I am on X and TikTok, but not as present. I have a website, lauraosnes.com, that I'm on Spotify. You can find my music on Spotify. There's a lot of my Broadway stuff on there, and you kind of have to hunt for my original stuff because it just has less listens because it's new. But it's, I'm everywhere and would just so appreciate people following along on the journey. It's so great.
Laura, thank you. You're such a delight. Fam, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode. I will see you next week.
Thanks, Annie. Bye, everybody.
Hi, friend. I hope that this blessed you and encouraged you, reminded you that God gave you a unique light, and it is your job to shine it in this world because we need you to. That being said, if you were blessed by this message and you can think of anybody else that also needs this type of encouragement, do me a favor, hit like, hit subscribe, leave me a comment. It helps me out a lot and helps this message that I do believe God gave my heart to share with the world gets out. I hope you have such an amazing rest of your day.